Hi, everybody. Welcome to the ithurtstomom podcast. I'm Lauren Rose, and this is the last episode of 2022. So that's really exciting. I just started this podcast a few months ago. So thank you all for coming on this ride with me and starting my journey of podcasting. I'm really excited that some of you have found a lot of value in it. So thank you for that. Today's guest is Elizabeth Andreyevskiy. She's a stress coach for moms, and she helps overwhelmed moms reduce mental stress so that they can respond with patience and calm, which I think we all want. So please introduce yourself a little bit and tell us what you do and how you can help overwhelmed moms.
Yeah, so I'm Elizabeth. I'm a stress coach for moms. I have 4 kids, my 3 boys and a baby girl. So my boys are
Aw.
11, 8, 5, and 18-month-old girls. So it's a full house. We have
Yeah.
lots of noise and energy in our home. And I got on this journey like a few years back. I was struggling parenting one of my kids, one of my boys. He was the youngest at that time. And a friend of mine suggested to go to counseling for parenting. I resisted a little bit because I'm like, well, I read a lot of books on parenting. I've always been into like self-development and stuff. And I'm like, well, I should know. But he was a little different than my other two in the sense of like he was so curious. He was so busy. He was like one of those kiddos I constantly had to be on guard. I couldn't just let him play quietly for 5 minutes. Like he would get into something that he shouldn't. And I felt like he never listened to me, and he was, I think, around 2 at that time. Anyways, I went to counseling and I was introduced to conscious parenting / respectful parenting / gentle parenting. Have you ever heard of that? Have you heard of
I
that
have.
approach?
I haven't. I've heard of the positive parenting, proactive parenting,
It's
but
same thing. It's same thing. There's just
okay.
different labels for it, and it's all
Okay.
about having an emotional connection with your child and that being the base of your relationship. And when you're in good terms with them, when you're emotionally connected, your kid is going to cooperate more. Just like when you and your spouse are emotionally connected, you had a good time together, he makes you feel seen, heard, and understood, you're a lot more likely to cooperate with his requests, what he wants, or like something he asks you, versus when you've had tension and resistance and like you said something rude, he said something rude, and then he asks you to do something. You're like, you know what, do it yourself. Like, I don't want to help you.
Yeah.
Right. And so same thing with our kids. And it's all about also teaching emotional regulation to your kids, managing their emotions, but it all starts with you. Like, how are you going to teach this to your kids if you don't know how to do it or don't implement it? And I started trying to implement the new way of parenting. It just felt right for me. That was something that I was like really drawn towards. And I really struggled in the beginning. I noticed that if I was worn out, if I was running on empty, if my needs were not met, if I was stressed out or overwhelmed, I literally could not remember the tools and the strategies I learned. In the heat of the moment, everything would just go out the window, and I would go back to my old ways of like threatening and raising my voice and yelling. And not like I didn't do a ton of yelling, but just lots of like attitude and frustration towards my kids. And um, around the same time, shortly after I started counseling, I ended up buying a course from an influencer called Unburdened. And it was all about prioritizing your needs and taking care of yourself and structuring your days and your life to support you, to reduce like stressors and overwhelm in your day. Like, you are an action taker. You're able to do something about things in your life that are in your control. You're not a martyr to being a mom, and I started implementing the things I learned in that course. I was really inspired. I'm like, okay, I'm going to like delete things out of my life that are not serving me. I'm going to create a day that supports me, create practices and habits that support my mental well-being. I started getting up before my kids in the mornings and using that time to practice healthy habits like journaling and meditating and just like deep breathing and stuff like that, just to kind of like set myself up for success. And I noticed a huge difference in how I was showing up as a mom. I was a lot more patient. I was a lot more calm. Like, I was able to start my day off like proactively, have some alone time, drink my coffee in peace, have my breakfast, and like I don't know, my whole life just shifted. Like I felt so much better. I was actually able to implement the things I was learning, like with parenting and counseling. And granted, like then COVID hit, like we were all in shutdown, we were all
Mhm.
home, the kids were home all the time, and I was still able to show up as that parent I wanted to be most days. Not all of them, obviously, no perfection
Mhm.
here, but most days. Um, and then I'm like, okay, I feel like I discovered this little magic thing that many parents don't know about. Like when they are overwhelmed and stressed out, when they are exhausted, lack of sleep, when they're not, haven't eaten anything, they will be more reactive with their
Mhm.
family. And I started teaching this. I started a podcast called Emotionally Healthy Legacy, teaching moms the things that I learned. And then my coaching program was birthed from that. So that's where I am now.
Awesome. So I love the term emotionally healthy legacy. I think it sounds fantastic. So can you explain a little bit what you mean by that?
Yeah. So when we are dysregulated, when we're triggered, when we're overwhelmed, when we're stressed out, we tend to say and do things we regret, right?
Mhm.
We'll like raise our voice. We literally say things that we're like, oh, that didn't mean that. I want to take that back. And oftentimes it will cause over time, if not restored, if you don't repair the relationship, it will cause damage, emotional damage to your family members, to your loved ones. And so when like you take care of yourself, when you prioritize yourself, you're able to feel better internally. And then you're able to respond better emotionally and create that emotional connection with your family instead of like rupture. So it's all about like creating an emotional connection with your family and your loved ones that when your kids get out of the house when they're in their late teens or 20s, that they want to come back to you and spend time with you because they have that emotionally healthy bond with you. And you've created that emotional safe space for them. And it starts with like you take, I don't know, it's just, I've noticed that when moms are so burned out, overwhelmed, and stressed out, they will emotionally react. It just like
Mhm.
there's a science behind it, how your brain works. They will react. And when they take care of themselves, when they slow down, say no to things that don't serve them, they're able to be better, like in the way they respond with their family. And that's when you can create a better connection with your family and kids.
Right. What are some of the biggest mistakes you see moms making that are negatively impacting their kids?
Trying to do too much, doing all the
Mm.
things and not asking for help, trying to do everything yourself. And I know like your podcast is about mamas who have chronic pain conditions and like
Mhm.
it's there's like a whole nother aspect to that. So I can't relate to that in that sense that I've never experienced any chronic pain like that in my
Mhm.
life. So I can't relate to that aspect. But what I can tell you is that when you're you are experiencing chronic pain, what just pain in general, your brain perceives that as a threat,
Right.
right? Like that's just normal. It's just designed that way. And when our brain perceives something as a threat, it shifts to a different part of our brain. And we
Mhm.
tend in general to be more reactive. So like when you have a headache and your
Mhm.
kids are like loud and making noise, right? And needing you, you're a lot more reactive versus if you don't have pain, right? Like
Mhm.
you got a good night's sleep, you ate, you had some alone time, right? And so I just want to kind of point that out to you, mamas. It's not because you're a bad mom. If you
Mhm.
react with your kids, it's because you're struggling. Okay. So, one of the things that you can do is, as much as you can, surround yourself with a support system. If it's your husband, ask him for help. If you have family nearby, ask them for help to make life and things a little bit easier. If your kids are older enough, delegate tasks and chores to them. Ask for help because when you're overwhelmed, you will be more reactive. And if you're trying to do all the things, right, eventually it's going to pull from somewhere, right? We all have a limited amount of energy, like this emotional or mental or physical energy tank. Let's combine, right?
Right.
And so we have like a limited amount of energy that every single day. And when we get to empty, like it starts pulling from somewhere. It starts pulling from your emotional well-being, from your mental well-being, or your physical well-being. It's gonna pull from somewhere. Okay. So recognizing like, what are my limits? Like, am I a person that can be out of the house 6 days a week every evening and that be fine? Or am I somebody who needs to stay home most days a week and have like maybe 2 evenings out of the week, like with activities or whatever and commitments? Like creating a day and a life that supports you and like helps you instead of creating more chaos and overwhelm. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And for you listeners with chronic pain, if you haven't heard of the spoon theory, go look that up. Just Google the spoon theory. It's a metaphor for how people with chronic pain and chronic illness start out with fewer spoons or less energy,
Mm,
and I take that to mean not just physical energy, but also emotional energy. And so we start out with fewer spoons, and everything we do, from taking a shower to making breakfast to going to work, those all take spoons. So by the end of the day, when we're running almost on empty, we kind of have to decide, can I handle this or not? So um, when she was talking about energy, it was making me think of the spoon theory, because we've got less energy, and yeah, we can push it today, but that's just going to take away from our spoons that we have tomorrow. We're going to suffer for it for at least a day, sometimes more, depending on how far we push it.
yeah, and that's really good that you said that because like, and which means you might have to do less than maybe
Hmm.
another average mom who doesn't deal with a chronic pain condition. That means you might have to say no to some activities with your kids that they want to go to
Hmm.
protect like your overall well-being and your family's well-being, right? Because if you're reactive, it seeps into the rest of the family. It's not just you, right, that gets
Right.
affected. And so like recognizing that is so essential. And like, mama, if your kids are in activities, if you can have your spouse drive them, if you can have someone carpool, if you have like grandparents nearby, be like, hey, can you take them, drop them off? And like, just like think of this like, instead of like, oh, I am weak for asking for help, say, I'm doing this to support myself and to make life easier. Like literally, I'm doing this to
Hmm.
support myself and make life easier. I can either do it myself and get even more worn out and like less energy and just completely burned out and it's suffering the next day, right? Or
Hmm.
I can just make things easier and ask for help.
Absolutely. And when I ask for help, it kind of I kind of feel guilty sometimes, but it definitely helps in the long run. So, my husband's able to, take our daughter to school 2 days a week. So that's 2 days a week that I don't have to do it. And even those 2 days make a huge difference for me. So I stay calm most of the time when I'm parenting, not perfect. I'm not a big yeller. Even when I, fight with my husband or something, we don't yell, but sometimes I am reactive. Sometimes I do raise my voice. Once in a while, I yell. Once in a blue moon, I'll slam a door without even meaning to, right? It's just kind of an impulse. Not often, but it does happen once in a while. What do we do when we feel out of control like this?
Yeah, I think we all have moments like that. And let me kind of explain quickly what's going on in your brain and why that happens. So you kind of have an idea and then we'll say what you can do, right? Like
Okay.
I teach a lot of proactive things, so there's less moments of like that. And then what do you do in the heat of the moment? So we have our three different major parts of the brain when it comes to like emotions and our actions. So we have
Mm,
our thinking brain, which is right behind our forehead. It's our frontal lobe. This is the part of the
right.
brain where we learn new skills, we problem solve, we um, make decisions based on our values. This is like the positive part of the brain. You and I are in there right now. And
Mhm.
then when we sense some sort of threat, or we have unmet needs. So like when you're tired, that's a threat to your brain. It's an unmet basic need, like sleep deprivation. When you are hungry, that's a threat, right? We're not so nice when we're sleep deprived and hungry. Nobody really is, right?
Right.
That's a threat to our brain. When somebody says something that is triggering, that's a threat to our brain, like based on our beliefs and things that, we kind of like grew up with. When there's overstimulation, lots of noise, and if we're highly sensitive, that is also a threat. When we're pulled in many different directions, like you're doing too many things, like you're multitasking and committed to too many things, that is also shifting your brain into like a place where it senses a threat. And it's right in the center of our brain, and it's our emotional part of the brain. This is our feeling brain. And this is where like our big feelings live. And when our brain senses some sort of threat, it shuts off our thinking part of the brain. And in our feeling part of the brain, this is when it comes out in our words and kind of like our attitudes. So if we're frustrated, we're going to be more snappy and rude and disrespectful. We only see our perspective in that part of the brain, and we start saying things that we regret. We're not necessarily doing yet, but like it's verbally, right? So that's when you're in a conflict with your spouse and like he said something that really pissed you off, and then you reacted in a negative way, and then you said something and you're like, oh my gosh, I should not have said that. Like that's because your thinking brain was shut off. You literally couldn't think clearly in that moment. We over exaggerate. We only see our perspective when we're there. And when the stressor builds up enough, and there's enough threat, like enough things build up all at once, right? You're running late, you're already overwhelmed and stretched too thin, you're sleep deprived, you haven't had breakfast, your phone is ringing, your kid is melting, right? Like all of it is building up all at once. And then like you never had any alone time. Your tolerance level is just like very slim, and you get to your exploding point. We shift to our survival part of the brain at that point. And that is fight, flight, or freeze. So some people fight, they yell, they raise their voice, they freak out, they scream. Some people freeze, they like just shut down. Like, like sometimes when you're in a conflict with your spouse and things are too much, you just literally shut down. You're emotionally flooded. You shut down, not necessarily to piss them off, but like that's just the way your brain is. Or we flee. Some people are like, you know what? I'm just not even dealing with any of this. Screw all this. I'm walking away, and that's something that is just automatic. We don't necessarily get to choose that. That is oftentimes kind of based from our childhood or just the way you were wired. And so when you are at a point where you're just kind of like raising your voice and maybe slamming the door. Oh yeah, when we're in our survival part of the brain, it's a lot more, not so much verbal, it's more about like action, because it completely shuts this part off, the thinking brain. And that is when we want to, maybe if we're physical, throw things, if we want to hurt someone, slam something, slap someone, right? It's not safe. Absolutely not safe. And so like that's why I teach the things that I teach, is like, let's have less of those moments. So when we proactively take care of ourselves, for instance, we make sure we eat, so our brain senses less of a threat. Sometimes we're still overwhelmed, we're rushing, we're running late, but if you're hungry, everything is a lot more intense, right?
Yeah.
So you take care of yourself and you take the time to feed yourself, then the threat will be less. If you go to sleep at a reasonable hour and get good night's sleep as much as possible, depending, on your chronic condition, if there's anything you can do, like there's still natural ways that you can do to support your, sleep, by like not drinking coffee, by not being on your phone, right? Like there's all these other things that you do what you can in your control to get better sleep. So when you're sleep deprived, you're going to react more. If you had a decent night of sleep, your brain senses less of a threat, right? Like another thing proactively is not overscheduling your life, right? So you're not constantly rushing and going. Having regular time in your day to decompress or kind of fill your own cup, so then your tolerance level is so much higher. For example, like when you wake up in the morning, your stress level is at its highest. So let's say 10 is your max when you lose it, and you wake up, you're like at a 7. And that's where your nervous system is. And if you just jump in your day and you rush, and you go, and you're running behind and stuff, you from 7 to 10, like there's not much wiggle room. But if you get up a little bit before your kids, maybe half an hour, maybe an hour, and you have some time to decompress and like calm that nervous system, phone free. So tempting. I get it. Like put your phone in a different room if you need to, but make yourself some coffee, grab yourself some breakfast, sit down, journal. I'm a believer, so I'll read the Bible or something. And sometimes I meditate and just sit there in stillness and silence. And like that brings me down to like a 2 or a 1. So then when my kids do get up and the morning is a little bit chaotic with them, because I can't control them, right? Like my tolerance level is so much higher. I can like to 10, like there, I can handle so much more. So those are some like proactive things that you can do, because if you're just waiting till the heat of the moment, like not really helpful, right? You gotta set yourself up like in a way that like you're doing things on a regular basis proactively to react less to begin with. How about when you are reacting, right? We all still have days like that. Life happens, things come up, you're having a tough day, things are not going your way. Spouse said something, the kids are not listening, and you're reacting. So I teach my mamas in my coaching program, we create this when then statement, and we create this ahead of time, okay? Not in the heat of the moment, but you're using it in the heat of the moment. So when I feel overwhelmed or stressed, or when I feel like I want to yell, when I feel angry, whatever your when then is, like, then I will blank. Okay. So what is the positive way you're going to handle it instead of reacting? So one of the biggest things that I teach moms is, if at all possible, if everyone is physically safe, like your kids, you're not like driving or anything, walk away. Because if the stressor keeps building up, it's going to get to that survival part of the brain where you completely react, right? Like, have you ever been working on the computer and you have some tech issues and you're getting so pissed off, you want to just slam that computer, right? Like, because it's building up. And it's like, you literally have to walk away. Sometimes you just like, I have to clear my mind. I'm just going to shut this off and come back to it tomorrow or like an hour later, because the stressor built up so much. You have to walk away as much, in the sense of like, if possible. And I have 4 kids. So like, how do I do this? When my husband is not home and I have 4 kids, I will say, I feel really angry right now. I don't want to yell. I need a break. I feel really overwhelmed right now. Mama needs a break. So I will strap my baby. If she's not sleeping, I'll strap her in a high chair, give her some snacks, turn on a cartoon for her, and I will turn on the TV for my boys, because that's literally the only thing that keeps them occupied without getting into fights with each other. Like, that's what they're doing now. Because if they're outside playing, eventually somebody's going to have some sort of conflict and they're going to come in and, and need my help and support. So that is like, I do what I can to make it easier for myself. And I will literally remove myself from that heat of the moment. And I will go to my room. Sometimes I'll step outside. I live in Florida, so it's nice this time of year.
Nice.
But sometimes I'll just go to my room, leave the phone in the kitchen or in a different part of the house. I am the one who's tempted to just scroll to escape the uncomfortable feeling. I'm honest. Like, if I take my phone with me, I'll scroll. So I have to leave it in a different part of the house, go to my room, close my eyes, and I will just take some deep breaths to calm my nervous system. Sometimes I visualize a safe, like calm, peaceful place, like at the beach. I'm like floating in the water and sun is shining on me. And I will tell myself, this is what it is right now. I don't like it, and I'll get through it. This is hard, and I can handle it. Like, this makes sense. I'm frustrated, and it makes all the sense. Like, I'm allowed to be upset. I just need a moment to myself and I will feel better. Like, whatever you say the mantra to yourself, like a positive mantra that will acknowledge where you're at. So like not this positive, like what is it called? Toxic positivity. Like I can't do that. Like I need to get the negative out before I can fill myself with positive. And so I can't just shove positive thoughts when I'm like feeling really negative, right? And so I have to get the negative out and be like, okay, this is what it is right now. I don't like it and I'll get through it. I'm so frustrated. I'm so angry. Sometimes if possible, I'll write it down in a journal. It gets it out of my head on paper. Sometimes I will literally speak out loud, like vent out, like out loud to myself and like pace the room to move that negative energy, like pacing. And then I need to kind of like calm my nervous system with like deep breathing, a positive mantra, visualizing, or just literally close your eyes, lay in bed and like lay on your bed and just lay there for like 5 minutes. So, like literally just lay there. Whatever you do, it's to calm your nervous system. It's to decompress that stress and that, stress response that is created in your brain. And then you're like, what do I need right now? Like, do I need to eat something? Is that why I'm so triggered? Do I need to drink some water? Do I need to put the kids to bed a little bit early because I haven't had any time to myself today, and like I feel so worn out and I need like take a bath or something. Do I need to ask my spouse for support? How can I make things a little bit easier? Can I just go put the kids in the car and go to Chick-fil-A or something, like, depending, like if that's something available for you, but like, how can I make things a little bit easier for myself right now to just like cool off? But the biggest thing is like having a plan. What are you going to do instead of reacting? Like when you feel that frustration come up, when you feel that you are raising your voice and having some attitude, like what are you going to do instead? We come up with a plan, and then you say that out loud to yourself on a regular basis. Like every time you wash your hands, you're like, when I feel angry, I will take a break and then take some deep breaths to calm myself down. Whatever it is for you that we made up that is helpful for you. You can write it on your mirror. That reminds you every time you wash your hands. You can put on a Post-it note in the car if you want to. You can just write it in your journal every single, day when you have your alone time, like to get it ingrained in your brain so it becomes automatic. So when that heat of the moment comes, even though your thinking brain is shut off, because you've practiced it enough, like it becomes an automatic. And I just want to let you know, it takes time to reteach your brain old ways of doing things. It just does. Like it's like learning a new language. And that's hard, right? You have to repeat it and practice it again and again. And it's normal that in the beginning, you kind of like will struggle. And that's why the proactive stuff is so important, because it will just allow you to have way less of those triggering, challenging moments.
Yeah, I love the idea of having that plan ahead of time before, we get reactive. So we've got a situation where, when we're in the heat of the moment and reactive, it's a good thing to walk away. Then we've also got the flight response, right? Where you walk away to avoid the situation. So if we're walking away, I guess we need to be mindful of which one is in our brain right now, and maybe even tell our family, hey, I'm not walking away to avoid this. I'm walking away because I'm about to scream at you.
Yeah, no, you're so right. Because like, in our marriage, so my husband walks away to avoid, right?
Okay.
That's the way he does. I walk away because I don't want to say or do something that I will regret later. And sometimes, like, depending on that conflict or whatever, and he's like, we need to talk about this. I'm like, I can't. I need to take a break. Or I will say something I will regret later. I'm like, I live where it's nice outside most of the time. So I'm like, I'm going to go take a walk, cool off. And sometimes I like literally have a pretend conversation with my husband as I'm walking, and I say all the nasty things I want to say, like, so I don't actually hurt his feelings when I come back. I clear my head, maybe listen to some positive music on the way back, as I'm walking. And then when I come back, I'm able to think a lot more clearly and actually have that communication. And like he knows it by now. Like, and I've communicated this with him. I'm like, when I say like I need to walk away, it's not to avoid it, because I'm a person that resolves conflict. I'm like, if we shove it under the rug, like what's the point? Like it's going to come back, right? Like we have to talk it out. But sometimes I'm not in a place to talk about it right now because I can't think clearly. I will over exaggerate and say hurtful things, and it's just damaging. It's not going to help anyone. Then you're going to have to do repair and have a whole apology thing, And so just even communicating that with your spouse, And so, yeah, that's kind of how we do it.
Yeah, it took my husband a few years to realize like I need time also to myself to process. So before I can actually get words out clearly in a cohesive manner, I have to go and think and process on my own before I can have, these deep conversations.
And that's so good. You're so aware of that. And that is so helpful in like relationships, right? Instead of like trying to try to resolve it right away. Like that is something that I had to learn in my marriage, because I used to be the person that like, let's talk about this right now. My husband's like, I can't. I don't know what I'm thinking. I'm like, well,
Right.
think out loud, because I'm an external processor. And he's like, I can't. I literally don't know what I think about the situation. He's like, I need like a day or two to like process this in my head. I'm like, and then a day passes. And I'm like, okay, you had enough time. Let's talk about this. He's like, I still don't know what I think about. I need more time. And he has to like literally also like remove himself from the situation. He'll like play a game on his phone, but while he's doing that, like his brain is like, processing it. I need to verbally talk about it. I need to journal about it. If I can't verbally talk about it to somebody,
Right.
sometimes I will literally go on a walk and like talk out loud to like God, or like have a pretend conversation with my husband. Like as I'm processing it verbally, I'm like, oh, that is what's going on. That is why I feel what I feel. That's why I'm reactive or whatever.
Yeah, I either have to write about it or I have to spend some time thinking about it. It doesn't take me a day or two usually. Recently, it took me a day to kind of realize what was going on in my head. But so you talked a minute ago about apologizing. So there are, two schools of thought on apologizing to your kids. There's a school of thought where, yeah, if you even if they've done something wrong, if you yell at them or respond in a negative way, you should apologize. And there's other school of thought where, well, they did something wrong in the first place. Why should you apologize? So I always apologize. My husband and I always apologize to our daughter when we raise our voice, even when she is the one who did something wrong at first, because it doesn't necessarily make it okay for us to be yelling at her and getting upset. What are your thoughts on that?
That's a good one. Thanks for asking. That's a really good question. So here's what I believe, that you are responsible for your own actions. Nobody can really make you do anything, right? Sometimes certain circumstances contribute, to,
Right.
kind of to push you into one direction or another. But technically, your kids don't make you yell and scream. That's something that you do, and you are responsible for it. What I can tell you that is when you are in your emotional or survival part of the brain, because your thinking brain is shut off and you can only see your perspective and how you are correct, you will see how they made you do it. Okay. How it's their fault. They made you do it. So here's the thing with that. When like something like that happens, in the heat of the moment, if I raise my voice, when I raise my voice with my kids, my brain only sees how they are at fault and how they made me do it. And even though I recognize that what I did was wrong, in the heat of the moment, okay, so sometimes when you're like just in your emotional part of the brain, you can be like, oh, I'm sorry, I yelled. I should not have done that. Let me try again. That was not, let mommy try again. You can do that. But when it's that survival part of the brain where it's like you're freaking out, screaming, about to throw something, hurt someone, your brain cannot think of a do-over. Like it cannot even access that part of the brain to like think, oh, I need to do a do-over, right? And you only see how everyone else is at fault. At fault. You literally cannot be a genuine, even if you try to apologize. When I was a kid, I was like forced to apologize even when I didn't see my fault. And it was not genuine. It was forced. It was fake. Because when you're in your emotional part of the brain, you only see how that they are at fault. That's why it's so important to cool off and process your feelings and like process that negative energy out. Sometimes it maybe even is a day or two. And then you're like, oh man, I was wrong. Like what they did was wrong too, but I need to take ownership what I did that was not helpful. So like, yes, they reacted, they said this, but I also reacted to it and that was wrong. So you go back and you take ownership for what you did. Okay. So like once you're calm and collected already, once your brain actually is able to see, like you can reflect and be like, okay, what was wrong? Like what went wrong? When I journal or verbally process, like that's what I do. I'm like, what went wrong? Like I know I'm not a bad mom. I'm a good mom. What was, instead of what's wrong with me, what was going on with me that I reacted? Right. And then like I reflect. I'm like, and what could I have done differently? Even if the other person did everything the same, what could I have done differently to diffuse the situation, to not contribute to it? And then you go back and you take ownership of it. And you go back to your kids and say, hey, yesterday when I really screamed out loud at you, I was feeling so angry and my feelings just took over. And I said things that I wish I didn't. I hurt you with my words. I am so sorry. I did not mean to do that. Like, I was wrong for doing that. Would you please forgive me? And typically kids are really resilient when things like that, especially when you take ownership, they're like, that's okay. I forgive you. And you're like, thank you so much for, loving me and, for forgiving me. And so you don't say anything about what they did. Like you take ownership of your own actions. And then when you are like, that's like a whole nother thing that I don't teach in my program, but a lot of things that I learned in my own counseling journey is like you later like teach your kids how to respond better too. Like it starts with you, but as you are getting better at this, you're implementing it. You teach your kids outside of heated moments how to handle their feelings when they're angry and frustrated without like taking it out in a, in a hurtful way onto the family.
Right. I totally agree because even though they did something they shouldn't have done, I think it's up to us as the adults, right? Because the kids are still learning, how to behave and how to handle situations, how to regulate their emotions. It's up for us to teach them how to properly respond in situations and how to come back and, like you said, take ownership when we haven't responded appropriately.
Yeah.
So you've talked about several reasons that moms get stressed out trying to do it all and not asking for help. Are there any other reasons you could think of that moms experience burnout? Or just
Man,
those the
that's
biggest ones, like
I
doing
I
it all and
I
not taking
think,
care of
well,
ourselves?
yeah, I think the biggest thing is like your mindset, right? Like you think that that's what you're supposed to do. Like it's what's you maybe were modeled that's was like I have two things. So I believe there's society messages that contribute to moms feeling like they have to do it all, right? You see this Instagram photos of these families that are doing all these crazy things and you feel like you have to and your kids are missing out if you don't like, and then you have that society pressure. Some of it is like you were modeled by like your parents. Like that was part of my story. My mom feels like slowing down and resting is lazy. And she like that's an internal belief that she developed from when she was growing up. Her mom was like that. She's always productive. Even when she's sick, she'll take the pills and keep going. Like even this week, like she has severe sciatic pain. She went to the chiropractor, he massaged her, he adjusted her, and then she went and still overdid it. And I'm like, Mom, you literally need to lay down and rest. If you don't pick a time to rest, your body's going to pick it for you, and it will be at a very inconvenient time. And it's like Christmas season, and like, you're forced to rest. I'm like, you need to rest. And so that's like another thing, like what you were modeled as you were growing up, right? That like if your mom was always doing all these things, you feel like you
Mhm.
have to do all these things. And then the other one for me personally is my faith. I was raised in a conservative, legalistic, kind of like faith background. And
Mhm.
there was all these messages that you have to always give, be always giving, be a servant, have a servant's heart, that it's taking time for yourself is selfish. We need to be selfless. And like they would just pull these Bible verses, and like I felt so convicted that I always have to take care of everyone else, and that taking time for myself is literally being selfish, and it's
Mhm.
wrong, biblically wrong. And because the Bible is such a big part of who I am, I like it was contributing to me seeing things from that perspective, and I was always overdoing it. And then it was showing up in burnout, right? And like
Mhm.
reactivity with my family. So I think those are like the biggest ones that jump out at me.
Okay. Yeah, I like to say self-care isn't selfish, it's essential. Um, and you talk about self-care, we've talked about it some on here, and you have an Instagram post that's called "You Are Doing Self-Care the Wrong Way." Can you tell us what we're doing wrong and what we should be doing instead?
Yeah, what I mean by that is that oftentimes moms wait to take care of themselves when they're already like burned out,
Mm.
and
Right.
like when everything is on fire and you're like, oh, okay, I need to slow down and take care of myself now. And that's when they will do that for like a day, or take one
Mhm.
bubble bath a month or every few months. And you're like, oh, it's just not enough. I feel like it's doesn't really do anything.
Mhm.
And the self-care that I'm referring to that's actually restorative and helpful and supportive is something that you do on a regular basis, daily, like literally almost daily. It doesn't
Right.
have to be 2 hours a day, but it's something that you do daily to literally take care of yourself. And it would be like eating meals, going to sleep at a reasonable hour, saying no to things that are like too much for you, right? And just taking care of yourself, like taking care of your skin, taking care of like yourself to like have some alone time, to feel restored, like to slow down, sit down on the couch and just look at the Christmas lights. Like we're recording this before Christmas.
Mhm.
So like literally sit down and just look at the Christmas lights and drink some hot cocoa and tea, and like don't do anything. Don't have your phone. Just sit there for like 5, 10 minutes, or grab a book or something. That is restorative. That
Mhm.
is helpful. Do that on a regular basis, not once a month, and you will notice a significant difference in how you're showing up.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I kind of compare um, self-care to kind of being underwater. So you're underwater and you regularly come up for air. When you go back underwater, your body is calm. You're able to, do what you need to do, stay underwater. You come back up for air, you go back under, your body's calm. But if you wait until your lungs just can't take it anymore to come up for air, then you're going to gasp for air. You're going to go back under. Your body's still going to be completely stressed out. And every time you come up for air, you're going to gasp. You're going to go back under. Never going to be calm and stressed out. So for me, it's the same with self care. If you wait until you just can't take it anymore, everybody's driving you crazy. You're about to have a nervous breakdown, and you go take that bubble bath. Have some alone time for 30 minutes, an hour a day, whatever it is, you know, that might fulfill you for a small amount of time, but you are still going to really be burned out and about to have a nervous breakdown because you
You're
haven't been,
so right. I
yeah, you
love
haven't
that
been
analogy.
good. I thought of it recently. I'm like, I wonder if that's going to make sense to anybody else.
No, I love it. I've never heard of it. Explain it like that. And I love it because you're right. Because it's like if it's once in a while, you're just gonna like, and then you're like going underwater again. And you're like, that's not enough. I need more air. I
Hmm.
need more air. Like, oh my
Right.
gosh, this is such a great analogy. You should like, I don't, you should like post that on Instagram, do a reel about it or something. I don't know. It was really good. That was a really good one.
Thank you. Just it came to me the other day. So we talked about, all the societal and relational and generational ways that we feel like we have to do everything. So, what are some tips to get over some of the mom guilt or parent guilt that we have?
Yeah. So with guilt, let's say you lost your cool with your kids. That's like the biggest one, right? Like when you yell on your family, you reacted, you lost your cool. I feel guilty. I don't know about you, but I know most moms,
Yeah.
feel guilty. And so, what is the internal message? What is the internal thought that goes through your head? I'm a bad mom. I'm failing
Mhm.
at this. I'm not meant to do this. Like my kids are gonna hate me when they grow up. They're gonna just remember with me yelling all the time. I'm like a terrible mom, right? Like I'm a bad mom. That's probably the biggest one that comes up, right?
Right.
And here's the truth. That's why reflecting is so important, and like journaling and slowing down. Like that's why it's so important, because then you reflect, you're like, is that true? Am I a bad mom? Or instead of what's wrong with me, what's going on with me? Because we
Mhm.
learned, right? When you have unmet needs, you're going to be more reactive. Like something contributed to you reacting. Okay. So then you're like, okay, what was going on with me? I was so overwhelmed. My kids were making so much noise. I was overstimulated. And like I had maybe woke up like 200 times the night before. I literally didn't have any good sleep. And I was hungry, making dinner because I skipped lunch. Okay, that's what was going on with me. Does that mean I'm a bad mom? No, that means I'm just struggling and I need some
Mhm.
support. I'm a good mom who's having a hard time. I'm a good mom who's had a hard day. I did my best and that was enough. So one of the biggest things is like with my mamas, we find that thought, the negative thought, we question if it's true. We
Mhm.
find like proof or facts that it's not true. And then we create positive affirmations that support like the positive way of thinking of like that that will pull you out of that negative like hole of mom guilt. So actually,
Mhm.
I have a gift for your listeners. It is a recording of positive affirmations, like an audio recording of like affirmations you can use when you lost your cool with your kids and you feel so guilty. And it's the ones that I was just saying, like, I'm a good mom who's had a hard day. I'm
Mhm.
allowed to make mistakes. I can repair this with my family. I did my best and that was enough. Just like ones along those lines that are positive and supportive and that like help you send safe messages back to your brain that will actually serve you. And then you can go and repair with your family.
That's wonderful. And for a lot of us with chronic pain, I think we have a lot of guilt because we can't do everything with our kids that they
Mhm.
want us to do, right?
Yeah.
And so I can't, take my daughter on walks. I can't, you know, take her to the park very often and play with her. I can only play a certain amount of time with her. So I've learned to modify my tasks. So if she wants to play Barbies, like I may not be able to play them on the floor, but I can play them, sitting on her bed or even lying down on her bed. And she's gotten used to it. I mean, I play a lot of board games just laying on the couch and she'll move the little pieces for me. She'll roll the die. She'll, spin the little spinner. And I had her on my first podcast, Parenting with Chronic Pain, and I asked her some questions and she doesn't care that I have to do things differently, that I can't do everything because she sees that I'm trying. And I thought that it was just really encouraging to me and for anybody else that, if you're really doing your best, your kids will see that. And if you're
Yeah.
a good, loving mom, you may not be able to do everything that, parents without chronic pain and illness can do, but we can do some things. We may be able to do them differently or for a shorter amount of time. But, as long as we're trying our best, our kids see that. My daughter's only 9 and she can see that.
Yeah, and especially as they get older, they will be really understanding towards that. Maybe like when they're, 5 or little, they don't understand what you're going through, but as they get older, they will. And they will see that you did your best. And like
Hmm.
literally tell yourself, I'm doing my best and that is enough. I'm doing my best and that like do this like a repeat mantra in your head every time you have
Hmm.
that like of comparison. I can't do all those things that other moms can, wish I could do that with my kids. And I can't even imagine, honestly, like, because I haven't had to deal with that myself in my life. And my heart goes out to you. And I feel so much compassion and, empathy towards that. So I'm so sorry, Mama, if you're going through that. the mindset piece is really important to redirect your thoughts. And
Mm,
you're either gonna push yourself more into mom guilt or literally get that thought. Is this true? Is it accurate? What are the facts?
mhm.
What is the new thought? Let's create that new thought and do it a repeat, because your brain is gonna want to do the negative thought. And you're just like, nope, I'm not available for that. Here's a new thought. And I'm gonna repeat the new thought for it to get ingrained in your brain.
Yeah, you know what they say, feelings aren't facts. Because I feel
Mhm.
like I'm a bad mom today doesn't mean it's actually true. So,
Oh, yes. I love that.
so if you could leave our parents with one piece of advice or encouragement, what would that be?
Yes. One of my favorite quotes is nobody benefits when you're running on empty. Nobody suffers when you take care of yourself.
Mm, yeah, that's great. Just another reminder that we have to take care of ourselves. It's not selfish, it's for the good of everybody around us. So, thanks for coming on. Where can we get more information about you and about what you do?
Yeah, so I have a free gift for you, positive affirmations, for when you explode and then lose your cool with your
Mhm.
kids. And it's also like 5 strategies to calm your overwhelmed mind there. And it's emotionally healthy legacies slash it hurts to mom. And I will send that to you and you can add it to the show notes. Also, I have my own podcast called Emotionally Healthy Legacy. So come and join me there. And I
Yeah.
mostly hang out on Instagram. That's kind of like my platform where I do create some more extra content. Also, the same name, Emotionally Healthy
Mhm.
Legacy.
That's awesome. Thanks so much. You can find me at ithurtstomom.com and at ithurtstomom on Instagram and Facebook, mostly on Instagram. And I'd also love to hear from you via email at ithurtstomom@gmail.com. Hope everybody has a wonderful day and a happy new year. Thanks.
Thank you.